Matt, how you doing?
Doing well. Hi there, Kevin.
So glad to get to talk to you today. I want to kind of bring in our audience, our future audience, as to who we're speaking with here. If they don't already know about this music and things you're doing, we're going to bring them up to date. So I'm really excited today to be talking with Matt Easton of the band The Jenny Thing, from the California Bay Area, right? Still
That's
California
right.
Bay Area, right?
Yep.
Okay. The Jenny Thing is releasing. This is Matt Easton. He's the band's lead singer and guitarist and keyboards, different things too, different instruments, multi-instrumentalist, right?
Yeah. I can play anything at a mediocre level. That's sort of that's my job.
That's what I say
And
about
to
myself too. But I'm
and
sure
to
you're
sing.
much further along than I am. I'm sure you're much further along. So you have a new album coming out with the band on June 18th, American Canyon,
That's it.
and
Yeah.
we're going to delve into that today. And that's after about almost 20 years of being on hiatus as a band. So we're going to dig into all that and get into all that information and learn about the band. So
Yeah. It's been a big layoff, and then at least for us in our small world, a big project
yeah,
suddenly caught up with us, and yeah, it's been a ride. So yeah.
I'm looking forward to delving into that and talking about the new music and how we got to this point. So um, the band has quite a history, but first I kind of want to just start and just ask you, how did you personally, Matt, how did you get started in music? How did it all come together for you, for starters?
Yeah, music. I mean, music has been a big part of my life, going way back. I mean, in the chronology of it, church choirs as a tiny
Yeah.
kid. I mean, like 4 or 5 years old. I got into piano in a big way, starting at 8, and uh, sort of begrudgingly classically trained, and then that sprouted into both kind of the synth world, but also pretty serious jazz playing in high school, and even considered doing it into college. But moving away from physically the piano itself in my parents' house sort of tilted me in a new direction. I got a guitar for graduation from high school, and then kind of went in that direction. And that led me to working with Sham and writing together with him. That was where original music really revved up for me, was in this band with these people at age 18, 19, 20. That was where that all came together. And then I would say, really, in the many years since, I think a lot of bubbles popping amongst my writing, prose writing, poetry writing. I majored in English lit, and poured a lot of those energies into songs. Uh, so yeah, I mean, and so today music is a huge part of my life daily. I play the piano most days still. Um, Play guitar every other day, something like that. And yeah, I just, at this point, I think the striving goes into the making
Mm.
of artifacts, of
Yeah.
trying to make something new, trying to make something, with a little hurt in it that resonates with other people. And it, that's what drives me at this point. And yeah, so music's huge. I'd even say music is passed down, because my kids are both huge musicians, um, and very serious, more serious at their ages than I was at that time in my life. And so that's wonderful too. But music drives me. Music moves me, and it's often the most important thing.
Isn't it exciting when you can see young people, especially your own children, being so interested in music? And that, it's not a forced thing. So many people like, oh, you have to take piano lessons, you have to do it, you have to do this, you have to play the trumpet. But when they just on their own are so interested and so involved in it,
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
parent who also loves music, to see that and know that you're not having to, you know, hold them at the piano down and say, please play this one more time,
Right.
you know,
No, it's when it becomes their own journey. That's that's when it's awesome. I mean, and it's they're you know, they're carving their own identities in it. I'm still trying to carve my own identity in it. It's good stuff, and it's sort of infinite. You know, um there's just more work to be done. There's more feelings to be felt, and I think they also turn us back to universal feelings.
Yes. Mhm.
And that's one of the, you know, sort of alchemies, magics of music, is we're tapping into something shared, uh almost especially on those songs that feel so specific
Yeah.
in our specific pivot points as musicians or just as humans. We feel things that are broadly felt, and I think that songs, you know, for me, songs in particular, and that's where I've put my craft, you know, is sort of, you know, what can you do in 4 minutes? And with a forced economy, right, of
Right.
4 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and sometimes in a genre which doesn't really want you to use all the chords, and doesn't really want you to use 6-syllable words. And um, in some ways, I think, you know, what people already know about music uh, innately or culturally is part of what you're tapping into. It has to be. It's right.
Right.
We're actually in hundreds of little traditions that are cycling through, and then we all have that kind of wiring, I think, to respond or open up, and it's fascinating.
It really is. I mean, and it is the power of a song, how life changing a few lyrics can be for people. I mean, for people who are out there, people like yourself that are out there performing, you know, I know we're not doing so much performing right at this very moment, but you know, think back to the days when you were doing live music and things. And when someone could come up to you and say, wow, I just love the lyric in that one song, and it really made a difference in my day or my life. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's got to be for people at all different levels in the music business of writing, for someone to come up to them and make it, to tell them that their music made an impact on their life, and sometimes life changing for this person. That's
Yeah.
got to be, you know, I don't think you'd ever hear it too much when someone is that passionate about someone's song that you wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think I've gotten many such comments, but I have had a few, and some of them have been really deep moments, right? So it wasn't the depth of the lyrics. It was almost as though the lyrics opened up a space for them to live in something far more uh, overwhelming and painful, in a couple cases people shared with me, than what I feel I was getting at.
Right.
And so, you know, that's again some kind of emotional resonance, you know, a gift to them, perhaps a gift to us, perhaps, to touch or be touched in that way. Yeah.
I mean, you started the process with your lyric, and then they took it to another level and heard another angle of what you were saying, and so you started that motion in their mind with your lyric, and then they took it somewhere else, and that's really and in many cases help someone. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
neat that can
I
happen.
think the pop song form is powerful in some ways because of what it can't do. And something, well, you can try to burden it with explanation, but
Right.
there just isn't really time in the form to spend on a lot of explanation.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are successful songs that do that, but I think what it ends up doing often is leaving space for people to just hold one image, or to just hold a feeling, and that's where the connection happens
Yeah.
between the text and the reader, or the performer and the listener. So it's that forced space, I think,
Right.
forced limit. It's a good thing.
Right. So you had mentioned going off to college and maybe thinking about taking music further. You were doing the jazz and everything, but then you decided to major in English, and that's still led to the songwriting part of it. That still helps in that vein. But you were at University of California in 1991, I believe, and that's how the band kind of came together. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the band came together at the Berkeley campus of University of California.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's sort of two threads of the band coming together. So the sort of pre-story is that I knew Mike, the drummer, from birth, literally. Our parents were friends before we were born.
Wow.
They still are. And then Aaron, I met. He's the bass player, Aaron Becker. I met him in junior high.
Okay.
And I don't know that we played together in any way until the Jenny thing. But he was sort of a known bass player from we intersected in junior high. He went to a different high school, but I always knew he was out there playing bass. So that's sort of like where the sort of initial personnel contacts were made, so to speak. But it was me and Sham hitting it off. We were both at Cal in the 90s and lived in the same boarding house. And actually we were friends and in a circle of friends for a number of months, or even bordering on a year, before I noticed that he had a guitar under his bed. And Sham's very self-taught. He's somehow very technical and not formally trained. So he's at the sort of intersection of, maybe he's a bit of an engineer, an artisan about music, sort of gets the job done, tries anything. Whereas I came from much more of a music theory, instrument-based, actually less oriented towards original music originally. I was more oriented towards standards or towards classical music or radio music. But it was us hitting it off, I think at the end of our freshman year, where we suddenly went, well, wait a minute, you've got a guitar and you're hanging around, and let's make some demos. And that was the genesis of the four guys, and then it's just been those four guys. And as I like to say, as we're trotting this album out, we didn't take a break as friends. We were spread out by distance at various times.
Yeah.
We've always kept up with each other and seen each other regularly, even in other places, visiting each other other places. But we didn't keep up the writing and recording, essentially for logistics and family life and complexity of life. But yeah, those are sort of the two tracks of the genesis of the relationships there.
When you would stay in contact with your band members over the years, would it come up once in a while, like, yeah, one day, I don't know when, we've got our families, we've got our jobs, but one day we want to do this again? Would it keep coming up? Would it keep coming to the surface? Or?
Yeah, good question. Not with a lot of specificity. I would say we would kind of do this, we'd have one song kind of floating out there between us, Sham and I. At one point it was with cassettes, and then later with MP3s and things, and very slow moving. But actually the first song on the album, Paper Angel, is a song that we wrote together via a 4-track cassette, 20 years ago.
Really?
It's been really reworked into the narrative of the album and has some new lyrics and new sections, but it really is that old, and we did collaborate on it together at a distance. That's not the case for the other 90% of the material here, but we didn't do much more than say, we got to play together someday, or maybe we'll play a club show and see if anybody shows up someday.
Yeah.
What we didn't, and we never really did that. And I think what we didn't anticipate, and is the surprise of American Canyon as a project in this moment as a band, is that it's much more about a whole new set of material, and even a new approach to making, and an approach to existing, I think, which is sort of virtual,
Right.
in some ways less precious than what we used to do in the past, I feel. And I don't know if that has to do with recording methods or just being more comfortable in our own skins, or just like not caring how we accomplish things at this point.
Right.
I think there's I think there's a compelling kind of trashiness or kind of collaginess to what we're doing now. And it's not what I would have ever had in mind as like a reunion, because I think a reunion sort of means like, dust off the old amp and get your drum chops together and see if we still know a couple of our old songs well enough to play in someone's backyard. Like that to me feels sort of like the de facto middle-aged, get the band back together. Sure. And this thing's sort of taken on a much more narrative, weirder, more intense and completely different, right? It feels like it's a new piece of railroad track we're on, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, that's really neat. Yeah. That's really cool, because it's really just, it's not a reunion. It's the next chapter in the evolution of the Jenny thing. It's really just the next chapter, like picking up where you left off. Not
it's shocking. I mean, you said it's really neat, and like, yeah, it's really neat, and not I'm not talking about the quality of it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the arrival of it, in my life is actually like, whoa, like where'd that come from? So yeah, it's actually a great experience, and we haven't put the record out, right? I mean, it's, we've got a few songs out, but most people haven't heard most of the record, and I'm already thrilled, because I'm not hanging my hat on a huge response. Actually, I'm quite delighted by the creative, and by the surprise.
I love it. Being in this industry, doing what we're doing, I feel myself very fortunate to have been one of those people to hear the whole album, to
Awesome.
hear everything.
So you've heard all 8?
I've heard all 8. Yes.
Awesome. Oh, great.
Yes, I really have. And I have my favorites, and my, we'll get into that and everything. I love it. I love it. I love the album.
Super.
I really do. And it sounds, you took sounds that were familiar to the time when you were originally recording and modernized them. And I love that. I love that modern sound with a retro combination. It's wonderful. Wonderful.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah. Thank you. We kind of followed our nose on it. And I think, if we're honest, I mean, it's funny. It's almost like we're a resurrected 90s band, but we came back in an 80s form.
There you go.
And I think it's as though we didn't start where we left off. It's almost like we started back in our bedrooms when we were like 10, before we were a band. I feel like that's in many ways the zone this album has begun to veer into. Anyway, I feel like we it's a little bit of a switcheroo. We're reaching back further than where we began.
It's kind of like the Star Wars prequels, right? It's kind of like they had the threat, and they went back and got those first 3. The surprise.
That's right. It's a prequel. That's perfect. Yeah. No, we've actually even thought that we certainly weren't thinking in terms of a trilogy or anything that highfalutin, but we did make 3 records. In our youth era, and now we're thinking we certainly have another one. Actually, I almost have like 3 concepts for the next one, and we'll have to cycle between them to get the job done. But we feel pretty confident we can do 3, so we can be a 3+3 band. 3. But I like the prequel idea that it's 3 from the past and 3 from the future, or from the distant past.
Right. Something that just a different way of looking at it, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
I want to ask you, and I'm sure the questions come up when many times, but I just want to give it context. I try not to ask the same kind of questions, but I have to ask this one. I'm just curious as to how the name came about of the band.
Yeah, no, you do have to ask. Yeah, it's not super interesting. I think, you had a couple 19-year-olds walking around on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley,
Uh-huh.
probably talking about, girl boy gossip type stuff. And as I remember it, the Jenny thing, or the thing with Jenny, or that thing Jenny has with that guy, and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it came up more than once, and we just started laughing at this idea that this is this universal topic.
Right.
Um, and then that got boiled into everyone's had a thing for a girl named Jenny, which
Uh-huh.
we actually got Martha Quinn to say on Star Search. We were on Star Search improbably at one point when we were actually kind of in our you know what should I say, sort of voluntary, involuntary decline, when we were kind of saying, all right, we're kind of putting a bow on this thing. We've accomplished a lot, and we're going on pause. But we went on Star Search. In any case, one of the taglines I think she said right before we played was, "This band believes every guy has had a thing for a girl named Jenny. I know my high school boyfriend did." I'm sure she didn't write that line, but so some poor hack is like writing this and putting it up on a cue card for Martha Quinn. So we got her to say that, somehow. But yeah, the name, I mean, it's funny. We don't at this point run around with any sense of weight on the name. It's like we got that name when we were born, and we still have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I almost feel like we didn't name ourselves, but yeah, we're called the Jenny thing.
And that's where and it's a neat story of how it came together, and that's where it is. And it's like, you don't want to change it, because that's who you are. And no matter how it got to that, that's who you are today. That's who so.
Yep, that's what you call the four of us, and
Yeah.
that's what you get when you call us that name.
I
Yeah.
did watch the Star Search video on your YouTube channel, and I got a big kick out of it. That was awesome. I mean, I was thinking, okay, so you guys were growing up in the first generation of MTV, and there you were with Martha Quinn, having her talk about your band.
Yeah.
I thought that had to be pretty cool.
It was very cool. I mean, it was sort of surreal. There were parts of it that were, actually cooler than we had decided it would be, and there were parts of it that were, kind of podunk and all that. And
Right.
But it was a fabulous time, and strangely, it was sort of the beginning of reality TV. I mean, it's almost like Star Search used to have that. They tried to make a comeback. They didn't eventually make it back over the hump, but then the world of reality TV and competition, music competition, sort of emerged. So it is funny to have, had a little tiny slice of that pie at that time. It was really quite fun, and it was specifically neat to have her there. We never rubbed elbows with Ed McMahon. He always had a stand-in that they'd put there, and then they'd just sort of like break him out, literally for 60 seconds, and then he'd disappear again. He really wouldn't work one more second than was required for the footage. And he was really good. I mean, that's the thing too, is you're like, boy, he's good at this. Anyway, yeah, but being with Martha Quinn for us would have been the big draw, was like, oh, this is one of the original VJs from the 80s on MTV, and that was a lot of fun. And actually, I wrote the lyric to the song Martha, which is on our third album, about a conversation I had with her.
Very neat.
Yeah. So yeah, Martha on Nowhere Near You. That's our third album.
That was like 1999.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And that was kind of, I'm just trying to put it all into context. So Star Search was in 94, I think. Around 94. I'm just going by the date of
No, I think that's right. But I think we filmed it 94 and it aired 95, something like that.
So then a few years later, after having interacted with her, you wrote this song.
Yeah.
And that's really something. That's cool. I saw, when I saw that, I watched the footage and I thought that would just be amazing as musicians, just getting out there and getting some exposure to end up on national TV talking to Martha Quinn. It doesn't happen every day.
Yeah, no, it was a kick for sure.
Yeah.
We'll never forget it.
Yeah. So you mentioned the 3 albums that had come out before these prequels that you're working on now, the 3 prequels. So is there one of those 3 albums that you're most proud of? I mean, I know every song and every album, there's a different reason why an artist would be proud of it, but is there one that stands out in your mind, like this was the pinnacle of what we did?
Right. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to pick two out of the 3, I suppose. But I would start with the second one, Closer and
Okay.
Closer to Less. That for me, we had a sense of assuredness and kind of capacity at that point to do like really dramatic stuff live in a way that I think was special, and was unusual. And we had a lot of excitement from our engineering and production team. We had national distribution going into it. So, I mean, in some ways I'm talking about the business aspects, but I think that it was the music and our ability to deliver it that had earned that kind of those opportunities. And that album to me, for our first 3, it was us being what we wanted to be on purpose for the first time. Our first album, I was learning to play the guitar probably like while we were making it, if I'm honest.
Uh-huh.
And I think we had happened upon a couple special songs, but we also didn't really know where they came from.
Sure.
Almost like we didn't know how to do it again. It was almost like we'd done it and we didn't know how to do it again. So second album, it was like we could get from point A to point B on a song and accomplish a whole night's worth of live, or not, a whole set's worth of live music that had this arc. And the song that would stand out for me, which we didn't put high up in the album, but it's called Sky Will Fall on our second album. And it is a Sham fest, Sham Rao, the guitarist, a Sham fest of sections. It's got probably 5 separate sections. It has this coda thing where it goes down to like almost 0. And you'll hear me do it again for the first time in a long time on Waiting for the Knife, where it's this kind of close-up breakdown. And it feels, I think you're a real music guy, so it feels very rubato. It feels,
Oh yeah, okay.
Feels like you're moving into this spoken word almost thing. I mean, there's plenty of melody. And I'm actually wearing my Les Mis shirt here, but
I did see it. I did notice that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a point in Javert's Suicide, right?
Yeah.
Or Valjean's Ticket Ripping.
Right.
Where before either of them howls out at the abyss or God or whatever it is, that it becomes spoken and so close to the voice that it feels interior. And Sky Will Fall, we played with that. There's kind of this death moment, or the candle is blowing out.
Right.
And we learned to do that live, and then we did it on the record. And so I'd say that's one of those moments where I kind of go, yeah, at that moment we had it all. We knew how to build it, we knew how to interpret it live, and we knew how to capture it on tape. And we had the people around us to help us capture it on tape in a way that tracked, that I think created those moments. So the second album for me was when we became able to create moments on purpose. And then the postscript, though, is the first album with all of its oh gosh, I only know 6 chords, and I need my capo and
right.
And boy, we can't quite get that groove together. It's sort of like a funk groove, but it's not that well played.
Yeah.
And it's coming out different. It's neither fish nor fowl. And what's bizarre is you give a project like that maybe 7 years, and you look back and you say, we aren't those people anymore, but how did they do that? Because it's so them.
Yeah.
And so I look back at our first record too, and I kind of go, the idea of that kind of pre-grunge, post Smiths, hard on the sleeve, diary entry, you're in college, you're not sure you want to be in college, you're not in college, you wish you were in college. A little bit of that sort of Gen X slacker,
Sure.
with this extra dose of sweetness and like naivete that we had. You see, you go back and you go, now I know how to make our records number 2, 3, and 4. I know how to make those. I don't know how to make number 1 anymore. And that gives me this weird, not respect for ourselves or the material. It just gives me this respect for almost like being true to what you are at the time you are it, and accepting it, and even celebrating it. That is the lesson to me of the first album. And so it's almost like, am I the most proud of it? It's like, no, but I'm the most mystified by it. It does something for me because I kind of can't figure it out now.
Right. I mean, you look back at it and you say, yeah, that was us. And how did that come together the way it did? Yeah, that's really something. That's I love all the descriptive words you use to describe that time, and just the way that you just portrayed that English major. Yeah, I mean, that's just your use of words to really describe that time. It's just really, you sit there and I felt like I was there. Like, you explained the different emotions and I felt like I was a fly on a wall listening to that band at that moment, like what was going through the minds. That's really something how you describe that.
Oh, neat. Great. Cool.
So when you guys were doing these albums, and during that period from 91 to 99, you were traveling up and down the state doing shows. And I know that I read that you had done a show at the Roxy, a show at the Troubadour, small club shows. Did you ever leave the state doing shows? Did you ever go? You said you had national distribution. Did they get you going out past California?
We didn't. No, we basically just ran on kind of 2 tracks in California, and it was college clubs, repeat. We would do, college radio and lunchtime concerts on campuses, which are so fun. And then we would do, sometimes in the same night, we would do an evening concert at a college and then do a club. So we sort of mixed and matched, those sort of different styles of performing or different channels of performing during that time. And we had a little bit of a nice radio support, I think tied in with the distribution, but also some specific connections that we made through private schools and the UC schools and all that. And of course, those were also our acquaintances, because we were students, right? So it was almost like, you leave your student housing in Berkeley and you drive down to UC Irvine and try to find a corner of a student lounge or the floor of someone's dorm room to sleep on. I mean, and that was the setup. It was, it was from college to college.
I have to mention, I'm not going to go into great detail, but I have to mention a time when I did go to school for music. I went to school, music education. I thought I was gonna be a music teacher. I ended up not being a band director, but I followed many other avenues in music. But I remember a time I played the clarinet, and we were going down.
I played the clarinet.
Did you play the clarinet? Really?
Yeah, that was my band instrument. Yeah.
I was going to ask you what you played, because I know you said you were doing jazz and you were doing, I thought maybe saxophone, clarinet. I wasn't sure what, that's really something. See?
Yeah. So you were on clarinet.
I was on clarinet, and we went downstate in Illinois for some kind of a clarinet choir convention, and they set up all the lodging for us and everything. And it was kind of like being a rock star, because we were traveling as a clarinet choir, and we had the rock star lifestyle as far as our living arrangements. I guess the people who made the arrangement, people had to volunteer to host us, the different people. So some college kids volunteered to host us. Well, they lived in a frat house, and they were having a party that night. They didn't warn us that they were having a big party, and they didn't tell their frat brothers that they were having us there.
Oh my gosh.
So they said, you could just stay in the basement. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Here's the mattress, and but don't tell anybody you're here. Well, so we left, And then meanwhile, we met up with other people, and this other person was at a house where they threw a mattress out for him that the dog usually slept on. So this was
Oh my
the
gosh.
lifestyle that I'm sure the different things, like you said, a place to crash. I lived it
Yeah.
without being a rock and roller, but I lived it as
Yeah, that's very punk rock for a clarinet choir.
so yeah. So I can appreciate the different, where are we going to stay tonight? That kind of thing. But so I had to mention that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's great.
so I was going to ask you, when it sounds like I guess you've kind of answered this a little bit, but maybe we'll go into a little more detail. When the band did kind of start to splinter, and people, it wasn't like it wasn't acrimonious. It was just that people were starting their lives. I think one of the band members went off to grad school, I believe it was, and people started families. They had their relationships, and um, did you continue? You said you've been writing. So did you find time for today every day? After that first happened, did you step away for a while from the piano or from the guitar? And then when
Yeah,
did you
let me
get?
think. No, I didn't completely step away. I continued writing. I actually did one solo record, a little EP. Um, and yeah, I mean, during that era, I probably completed, uh, you know, maybe 15 or 20 songs. And then Sham also had his own demos going and that kind of thing. But yeah, I played out with a couple configurations in a sort of solo group, and went a little more, sort of jazzy plus maybe adult alternative contemporary type stuff. And But yeah, I didn't get a lot of what's the right word? I mean, I guess I didn't get a lot of creative drive from that. I think it's an area where I'm sort of like, I'm competent at it. I like the idea of writing in that style for other people. And I actually have maybe 5 songs that at some point here, maybe when we find a lull after this record and before the next. But since I'm kind of up and running and in the conversation with a good number of people now, to shop that out to singers. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, music remained in life. Life was a bit busy, and I was a little just less organized and driven around delivering an artifact, as I like to call it. I think some of it's frankly insecurity plus a sense of a lack of uniqueness, that I'm capable of writing sort of like uh what should I say? I mean, sort of like well structured, uh maybe Elvis Costello-ish, maybe not as good. Elvis Costello-ish, Michael Penn-ish, maybe not as good. Amy Mann-ish, married to Michael Penn.
Right.
In this vein, and I love those guys. I think they have it covered, and when I kind of go out and do a tasteful mid-tempo, slightly surprising chord change song with forlorn vocals, I sort of feel like, yeah, I can do that. It doesn't surprise me. And I'm not sure the sum is greater than the parts. And I think that's why when I'm in that vein, I like the idea of picturing another singer, who would interpret in a second way, or take it in a surprising way.
Right.
And with, back to the Jenny thing, with Sham, I think he and I are very frequently surprising each other because we approach the thing very differently. Also very productively. I think it's that very specific combination. Sometimes you get along really well with other musicians, almost too well, to the point that a third thing is not emerging. It's one of you knows how to listen so well to the other that you just further the first idea.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. And that's actually what a lot of people want out of professionals. But I think for getting weird and having something turn back to you and speak to you that you aren't completely in control of, getting 2 factors or 3 factors of input that are in tension or just almost incompatible, and then you have to solve how to make it work. That's how you get surprised. And so I think that's what was missing for me. And I may well go back to writing some stuff for myself. And actually, frankly, some of the stuff on the record is written that way. And in a second phase is put through destruction or recombining
Right.
by Sham or by the group. And then you get your third thing. And I can tell you, like, More All the Time is a song that is more like Here Comes the Sun. It's very much an acoustic guitar song. I don't think I'm not playing any guitar on that song at all in the final analysis. I wrote it on a guitar and that was thrown away. And that's just an example where I think that songwriterly, acoustic, self-accompanying, expressive, and frankly McCartney to Costello type thing had to, for the purposes of creativity and spark, be thrown in a blender and come out unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in this band. That's different than what happens when I work by myself.
I think it's neat that you have the both worlds, as a solo writer too. And I know you said you find more inspiration trying to solve the puzzle of the other pieces that people bring to you in their songwriting, with, a guitar riff or a drum solo or just something, the beats, whatever it's going to be, a bass line. I think that's neat. And I also think it's really exciting that the process of being able to be a solo writer and write for other people. Then if you don't find that inspiration, like writing for yourself, like you say, a little bit, the fact of having another chapter of writing for other people then. And in the world that we live in, I say this a lot in interviews, so I always feel like a broken record, but I just feel like it's always worth saying where we're at in 2021 with technology, and unfortunately kind of forced to be at home a little bit more than normal. But even before the pandemic, 2015, 12, all these things just started happening in music, the technology and computers being able to record across the world. And with all the social media, maybe you could write for someone that you never dreamed that you'd be able to collaborate with, someone that you looked up to back in the day, that now is kind of on their, they're not worried about the hit single anymore. They're just worried about writing more music, and they'd be more willing than back in the day when they had the pressure of a record label to say, we need a hit. They're just writing. And if you were to reach out to someone by some social media and say, hey, that's exciting.
No, you're actually right on a trail that I've reflected about, and I've not brought it around, to fruition. But an idea I'm really attracted to is the idea of finding someone at a pivot point. And so they're moving from a pure performer or an actor, or maybe they're an original writer, singer, finding themselves at chapter 3 in their career, and being able to come in and both write for them to their comfort zone and write against them out of their comfort zone, and to almost as a second pair of ears and a second pair of hands to build some new pathways that could make somebody, and I don't think I can do this alone. I mean, the person would be critical, right? It's not me doing it to them. But I think that there is, again, that 1 + 1 = 3, where the right combination could say, how relevant could you be with a twist
Yeah.
to your old audience, or an audience you've never thought about, or both, because it's not a retread, because it's new landscape that you're traveling on. And that is an area, and there's some, the person who comes to mind for me who did that fabulously with Emmylou Harris is Daniel Lanois. I don't know if you know who he is.
Sure. Yeah, producer he's done a lot of YouTube production work, and
yeah,
yeah.
the record that he did that I think just remains as a knockout is Wrecking Ball with Emmylou Harris.
Oh, right.
And what he did on that, it's his role sometimes is to just make a rumbling sound on the guitar and let her sing her song. And sometimes it's to bring a song to her, same album, but to bring a song to her and very heavy-handedly almost underline all of the harmonics, even sing almost a second lead vocal under her. And it just shoots her off in these directions and these psychologies that we weren't going to hear from her. It's almost like we weren't going to hear that from her in this lifetime, but we did.
Yeah.
And that to me is just so exciting. And, like you're saying, because of the sort of thinning of the walls between people, and even the unrutting of the career pathways, which in some ways is really bad for a lot of those kind of 95th percentile people who had it locked in.
Right.
Maybe it's hurting their careers, but I think the opportunity then is, can you do something in this world that was just so improbable, except that you decided to do it?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's right on that knife edge that you go from same, anticipatable, as expected, and then suddenly a pivot. And again, like that Emmylou Harris record, it's old at this point. It's probably like a 1994, 95 era thing. But man, that pivot that she made with Daniel Lanois just opened up a dimension, certainly to her as an artist. I like to imagine as a person.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And stuff like that to me is, that's what so much of this search that we're all doing in our own little, with our own little teaspoons, we're digging in the dirt for like some little, we're trying to get somewhere real slow, most of the time. And sometimes we forget to do it. But when stuff like that happens, I go, that makes everything worth it. And it's somehow not about accomplishing even like one specific high height or accolade or whatever. It's just like to transform the space that you as an artist are in and that other makers are in is just magic,
It's a perfect time, like you said, the thinning of the walls. It's a perfect time to have this philosophy that you have, because there are so many artists that we followed back in the time when because we're pretty close in age here. I'm thinking back to 1991 graduation. We were starting college in 91. I think I was graduating in 91. College.
Got it. Yeah.
We're just a couple years apart here. And so we were listening to the same music at the same time. And a lot of those artists that we grew up listening to are now at the crossroads you're talking about. Do they stop recording, or have they already stopped recording and they're waiting for something to happen to bring them back to, and do they know how to do that? And someone like yourself to inspire them to mix it up a little bit from a production standpoint, from a songwriting standpoint, and to appeal to their old fans, but a new generation of people too.
Yeah.
To become relevant again, if they felt that they had ever become irrelevant unfortunately, because of the way the music industry takes artists and promotes them to a point, and then if the sophomore slump happens, or if whatever the case may be, or if the fifth album doesn't have 5 singles, it's a matter of inspiring them again, because they've gone through these artists, they've gone through that whole process, and a lot of them probably would rather just draw, or, paint a painting and say, I'm done with the music industry. And then that's where you step in, Matt, and you say, hey, but you're not done.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just take a different angle with it, and many years ago, that would have been a pipe dream to reach these people, but not in today's world with the ways that we can reach people. There's not those walls of, publicists necessarily, or, a manager, or they're out there, they have them.
Right.
People are more receptive to organically working with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's exciting to think. And I'm not certain I'm going to do what I'm about to say, but I think you're the right kind of guy to share it with. But American Canyon would work. It would need to be sort of double lyricked. It doesn't need really any more music. I've one more song I would stick on it to accomplish the idea, but it could work as a musical. And one of the concepts I've batted around is a synth pop musical that actually pulls in the voices of the past, that actually finds what you're describing, which we'll say, is it the 60-year-old or 65-year-old one or two hit wonder?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And connecting them into a story, to hold roles down in a sort of epic story. And it's actually, it would be sort of a musical about a child, and who is bounced between dreams of achievement and dreams of acceptance, and goes through defeat and violence and redemption and all these sorts of things. But that has been one of the, one of my Post-it notes in my Post-it note salad of brainstorming and dreaming, is in that vein. And that idea of finding icon voices that could just be one step away, is it possible to say, step forward, step into the spotlight, do something related to your foundation that surprises. And that to me it has so much potential. And forget my specific idea. I think just that idea of step into the light, know who you are, and surprise us and be surprised. That to me is like, wow.
And there's only a few examples of that out there, and that's why I think of one that I would think of, staying in the country realm with Emmylou Harris. Did you ever expect to have an album with Loretta Lynn working with Jack White?
Oh, no, and perfect. Yeah, and then what do you get? And the answer is like, find out. Because you can just imagine the strategic question up front from a business perspective is like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I would flip it around and say, we have no idea what we're going to get. Fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't been done before. We're not worried about copying someone else. Let's do it. Let's run with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for all of us, and you're teaching now?
I do teach. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your area?
I went to school to be a band director and ended up doing a musical. After I didn't end up teaching, it's very competitive to get that first job. That you got one summer to find that first job. And I ventured off into the music industry, working for record stores and managing and doing that. And then I just started teaching privately. Someone talked me into trying to direct a musical, not my own, direct something that was already done.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't know. I don't have mad piano skills. I don't, I love to play piano, but I'm self-taught on piano. I chord everything. I take the chords and I take them in. I don't just block them out. I arpeggiate them and whatnot. I try to make it sound interesting, I hope, but to read a score of a musical, to play the left hand, I don't know if I could do that. I know I can't do that. I can't play left-hand piano, without having the chords above,
Right.
I ended up doing it, and it ended up working out okay. And it led to me being more of a voice teacher than an instrumental teacher. So people say, oh, you played the clarinet too? And it's like, that's kind of where it all started. But I mostly have voice students. I mostly teach voice.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, and the reason I say this is just the idea of doing a piece or a song or a genre where you feel you don't belong is like, it's actually like a moment of power.
Yeah.
I think that's, and it's that same like Loretta Lynn, Jack White thing. It's
Mhm.
because you aim for one thing and you get another.
Right.
And like there's something about that that's just fascinating, and it's a little bit daunting, it's a little bit intimidating, but I like to think that it can be motivating and give you even more courage to find out who you are where you don't belong, because you're still you.
Right.
And to not be afraid of being deluded or to leave your scene, or and you know what, maybe these are the ramblings of a guy in his late 40s, because maybe you need to get a little more comfortable in your skin or more perspective to be able to say this. Maybe you need your band to fade away, and when you come back, there's no scene of note to rejoin. There's no one on the music side in some ways to talk to anymore. You
Right.
know, the pure rock and roll musician at this point is it exists, but it's not a specifically vibrant, cohesive,
Right.
collaborative scene. But again, that idea that you can go where you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and kind of trust the wildness of the outcome, trust the even volatility of the outcome. Like, sing the wrong genre, sing the wrong song.
I love it because I mean, look at the movie industry. How many sequels can be made of movies? I mean, how many times could the
Oh,
same movie be remade? And
right.
we have to look to something that's different, that's off the wall, because
Yeah.
I always worry. I mean, I'm an amateur songwriter, but I've not put my stuff out to the world or anything. But I always worry. I have a music collection that I'm afraid to listen to because sometimes I'm afraid I'm going to sound like somebody else. So when I know I have something that is completely mine, it's exciting, and it has to be different because it has to be. I go out of my way to stay away from normal chords.
Right.
It's not atonal. I like a pretty melody, but I mean,
Right.
I go out of my way to not do a 1-4-5 chord because I don't want to sound like somebody else, and I'm worried about that. And
Right.
so then in that process, then if I could do something completely different, like you said, a different genre, something that I'm way out of my comfort zone, and it could stick or something, that's pretty cool. That's
Yeah.
pretty exciting. And you would think that the movie industry, the music industry would embrace those kind of things. This is so off the wall that it just might work.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think what you get into is people are managing risk, which is like the opposite of the freedom to see what happens.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're saying, yeah, we know we can recoup, 20% over $120 million if we make Ghostbusters again.
Mm-hmm.
Because we did the research. It still has a strong brand, or
Right.
whatever. But yeah, that doesn't get you a new world. And I think, in writing, in particular when you're working in groups of songs or even in multiple kinds of media, um, it's fascinating how much of a space to create in occurs between two or three people or two or three songs or two or three places.
Yeah.
There's something in that 2-3 where you get that. I say couple three. I think that's what that's probably the colloquialism. Couple three things, and all of a sudden you've got area, you've got landscape, you've got. I guess you need four things to get volume, right? But there's this snowball effect. I think, if you sit there with a blank sheet, we all know the feeling. A
Yeah.
blank sheet is going to just wrestle you to the ground. You start throwing pieces into that blank sheet, and it gives you actually more constructive space to write in, more constructive space to think in. And then you get three sheets with three
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me and particularly about the American Canyon, I would say the American Canyon place on the American Canyon mindset or psychology is I want to go back and write more in there. So there's a point at the beginning where you go, oh, we got 3 songs and they maybe don't hold together, and 4 songs and they're starting to hold together, and there's 5 songs, and I'm going to start changing some of the words in songs 1 and 2 because I like what's happening in 5. And then you get to the end. I actually wrote the 8th song last, after everything else was done, with total retrospect. And you can kind of leave Easter eggs for yourself, in this one.
Yeah.
And then when you're done, you go, oh man, this isn't just a one arc. Now we have a place, and I almost want to go back,
Right.
and write there again, or write there more. And that maybe it's like sourdough starter or something. It's almost like you have a good batch, and you almost want to say, let's build the next thing, not only connected to this, but almost out of the same stuff, and then chase it in the next direction.
Right. You might find yourself writing a true trilogy. You might find yourself, based on American Canyon's concept, you might find yourself writing the next album with the band, along the lines of, like you said, picking up where maybe it wasn't in the initial intention, but as you talk about it, as you let that permeate in the air, like, like, is American Canyon, is that a finished, is there another chapter to it after that's released?
Right.
It's interesting to see how that evolves for you and the band. Yeah. That's really something. Let's talk about the album. I want to dig into the album a little bit. I want to make sure we get some time to talk about that.
Good. Yeah.
So how did you come up with the name? I know there's a track on the album. Sometimes I always find it interesting too when people put out albums where the name never comes up in the song, never comes up. There's not a track, and it's just mentioned. An example someone brought up to me the other day was the Sting album, Mercury Falling, where he says that at the beginning, he says that at the end, there's not a song title.
Right.
It's just that's an interesting way, or when the album title comes up in the middle of a song, not as the song name. So I always am fascinated by titles and album names. How did you decide that this was going to be called American Canyon?
Yeah, good question. So there's my dog. The working title of the album for most of its development was Guns and Drums.
Okay.
And that concept comes from the song All in My Head. And there's a violence theme that's written in and intended to run through a number of songs on the record, including All in My Head and American Canyon. And but the name actually is a real place. So when Sham makes his way down to my house, he lives a little bit outside of the immediate Bay Area. He drives through a place called American Canyon.
Right.
And actually, I was on a little bike trip and drove through American Canyon maybe 3 weeks ago, and it's just an amazing name.
Yeah.
It just sort of like, what does that mean? And where is it? And why is it called that? And so one day he pulled in here, and we poured our coffee as we usually do. And we sit at the dining room table and we kind of plan the day. We usually figure out where we're going to lunch. It's sort of the huddle,
Right.
And then we head downstairs and we mic up the drum kit and start, searching. We start, you got anything? I got anything? And that same day that he said, how about that place, American Canyon? That's a crazy name. I can't believe it's real. And I actually, in my notebook, not this notebook, I do a good amount of visual art. I'm not a particularly great visual artist, but I'm semi-prolific, and I really love to do it to kind of keep my juices flowing. Maybe because I'm not that good at it, or I'm really okay with experimenting and failing, and it's good training for the brain, I think. But anyway, I immediately drew this kind of Native American with this side of the head missing. Actually, on the spot that day,
Yeah.
I think like right after he left, I sat back where we were sitting and I drew this and made this American Canyon thing. And that day we also made the song American Canyon. And we made that song American Canyon. We didn't work actively for more than like 20 or 30 minutes. The lyrics were taken from the cast-offs of All in My Head. So it had this same idea of like weapons and madness. And it came, and I came up with this idea of not being defeated while you're being defeated.
Right.
And it has a lot of architecture in it. You may not analyze these things, but being the English major, you know, I kind of start and end there with the close read. But it has towers and arches and bridges, and there's this idea of actual like physical, almost like infrastructure destruction. And then I see it as this like the flesh and blood is emerging from it, even as all of that is being blown to smithereens. So there's sort of like a magical world where the flesh and blood survives, but the granite and the concrete and the rebar is like shoved into the ground. And that's the arches fall around me, still I'm lifted up. And so in American Canyon, there was all this sort of like epic imagery, and he got that kind of almost Led Zeppelin-y drum thing going. I think it almost sounds like Tears for Fears plus Peter Gabriel or something.
That's an interesting combination. Yeah, I can see that.
That's aiming pretty high. I realize. I don't know that we were successful, but that's where the mind kind of went. But it's very in this almost like blues key. It almost like never changes its chord. It has this kind of loopy, stuck, dark feeling. I mean, there are new bass notes that come in and everything, but it stays kind of in this minor third, fourth thing, and it feels kind of bluesy. And that song was American Canyon, and we called it American Canyon immediately because we talked about it over our coffee. And I sent it, or he sent it. How did that go? In any case, he goes home with the audio. He sends it back with the drums edited in. And we both, I remember it's like Sunday night. We have like a cycle, right? Basically, he shows up here about Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. We work till about 1. We get something to eat. Maybe we work another hour, or maybe we say goodbye. Then we kind of pick up the pieces. Now we're in the virtual world. Now he's got his laptop, got my laptop. We have kind of like dueling edits, right? It's sort of like, ooh, you put in a string patch, and like, ooh, you put in a bass, and you know, and then it kind of glues together. By Sunday night, that's when you kind of look back on the weekend. Sunday night, we're on Facebook Messenger, and the Dropbox is going and everything. It's like, oh yeah, you know, one more edit. I fixed something. Okay, so we're looking at version 7 or whatever, American Canyon, Sunday night. And I literally texted him. Well, we had this back and forth, which was, this is pretty good, right? It was like, yeah, this is pretty good. And then it was like, I think we went up a level. Like, I think this record needs to actually be good now, right? Like now the whole thing needs to be good because this is good. And then jokingly, not jokingly, I'm not sure if you're married, but I feel like it means even more to the spouse who, you know, I mean, right, the beauty and the curse of marriage, right, is that you take each other for granted, right? That's sort of the gift, the curse. You know, it's great to have somebody to take for granted, but also that's not us at our best selves, right? But in any case, I think I wrote him this. Someone needs to tell our wives we're still badasses, but it can't be us.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You know, it was almost like, who wants to show someone this song to prove that we're still cool?
That's awesome.
And that was American Canyon. So anyway, there's a long answer, but you're tracking with me so far. But so that's how we got the song,
right? And
then we then were on and off with this guns and drums thing, and felt like it was a really great concept, which was around, you know, real fears and fake fears, you know, and even the efficiencies of managing intimidation, right? It's sort of like, if you want to intimidate people, you need a bunch of guns, but if you want to intimidate people for cheap, you just get one gun and a bunch of drums. And we liked this sort of
Yeah.
musical and sort of like intimidating quality. And yet it felt a little literal. And so we had that in the back of our minds. In November 2020, we had hooked up with this guy, Ramesh Iyer, who shot our video with us for American Canyon. And I'll send you an edit as soon as we have one. We're showing we're very, very close. We're down to color correction and one effect scene. But we shot this November 2020. It's the middle of COVID, masks, 20 people in the desert. I mean, we had a medic, like checking our temperatures and all that.
Yeah.
We did it right. And that made it kind of even more exciting and alien. And when we got there to shoot the video for American Canyon, and we're in the Mojave Desert in this dry lake bed, and we've got this horse running around and this dog running around, the drones are flying, and we're getting this footage and we're going, this is pretty cool. And of course we haven't been anywhere in 7 months,
Forever.
months at this point, like all of us. So we were just glad to be out of the house, and we were like, man, like American Canyon is real. Like it feels like it's this. And we got very turned on to the sense of place and the sense of question mark and the sense of invitation of the concept of American Canyon. And that never is in the lyrics, but now more than ever, it also plays into the narrative of the album. And there's a pivotal scene which happens from American Canyon into Aromatica, which is kind of the scripted spoken word and soundtrack piece you've probably heard. That is supposed to actually outline a battle by this highly successful military person who goes out and on behalf of the United States is actually conquering and then sort of sublimating these planets into a big planet colony of sort of the American universe. And in that, he loses a battle so badly that he can't even understand what's happening to him. And so then there's this concept that he then has to make his way back out of this place where he's defeated, as almost like a saga or journey, the Hobbit, he has to, or the Wizard of Oz, he has to make his way back out. So instead of the idea of making your way in, it's the idea of making your way out of American Canyon. And so those are some of the underlying currents that ended up in the record and in the song and in the video and in the album. And it doesn't feel to me actually like it's about an expository blueprint. It's also very much a beckoning. It's like, let's all go to American Canyon.
Yeah.
Let's go together. And in the album art, which is now complete and in manufacturing, and I'll send you a copy of the CD. There are these elements of the American West and also of LA and neon. And there's this creature that we've sort of invented who's kind of like the nemesis of discomfort between doing your thing, taking your power, speaking your truth, making your way in life, taking what's yours, which is kind of one American dream or one human dream. And the other dream, which is about collective connectedness, worthiness. You are enough, be free, be safe, have courage, you are loved. And these two, we kind of swim between, and we're knocked about by, and we struggle against one and then the other and both. And I would say as a society, we try to substitute one for the other sometimes. We try to silence somebody who's struggling with one by shouting the other.
Yeah, no, you're right.
In various cases. And so there's a whole kind of, and it is, I mean, I'm getting pretty far out here, but I think you can take it. I mean, you're a writer. You're out there with, I'm imagining, dozens of students trying to like decipher and find their way in songs. And so I think you're the right guy, the right guy to take down this path.
I think it's amazing. I think
that's what's in American Canyon.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. And when you talk about the concept of a musical, taking it in, you said that the thought of that has crossed your mind. You've got a story. It's not 8 songs. How many songs are we going to put in this? A CD holds 74 minutes. I mean, I know we're in the digital world now where we don't think, that's a different thing I wanted to talk to you about at some point too. It's just,
You're actually not supposed to make albums anymore, they
right,
tell me.
right. Yeah, figure, right? So it's just the kind of thing where, back in the day they had to think about, we have to fill a CD, or is it an EP now because it's this many songs, or can it just be when the industry gave artists more space than a two-sided record to fill with 74 minutes. Sometimes that was good, sometimes not so much, because then people felt that they had to, and they forced extra songs that didn't fit the concept of their album or didn't fit them or their style. So
Right. Yeah. Track 11, track 12, like,
yeah,
take it or leave it.
right, exactly.
After a certain point. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this is, you really do have something here that these songs are attached together very much so. Even more so, I understand now that I hear you talk about it than I even originally realized, because I was picking parts of songs and going back to this song, going back to that song and listening to this, I did
And
switch.
it's meant to do that as well. I
Yeah.
mean, when I get off in this, whatever you call this state of kind of 3D creativity and searching and kind of like I'm like deep diving for like new resonances or just new imagery. I'm very, very aware that every track has to also just be a track. Every track has to like read as something kind of like a love song or a dream song. Someday I'm gonna.
Right.
I'm very, very aware of the form of what we're doing, and I would say I assiduously, and I hope I'm successful, but I assiduously try to avoid making a song that's expository about something that's going to be perceived as random, because I know I've got the backstory and I know you don't. So by all means, you can listen to just one track and just say like, oh, this reminds me of somebody I miss. This one over here reminds me of when I'm struggling, this one reminds me of a bad day at work. I mean, like, I know that like songs actually need to do that first, or I should just say they need to do that only when they need to do that only.
But how exciting is it though that they do connect though? Like that's so neat that they could stand alone or they tell a story. I think back to when I was in English in high school, the 3 levels to a story. On the first level, I had going to the beach, and the second level, going out to the water and seeing beyond the, and then the third level, something that, so it's like that whole thing. It's neat to know that someone will take this album and listen to individual tracks, but then when they hear you talk about it, or when you're explaining on a stage why you wrote this, or this next song ties into the last 5, when you're performing these songs, they'll have a greater appreciation, like I do right now. I've like I said, I've listened to the tracks. I know as I read about the different things you guys are doing and tried to look at some of their social media, that yes, it is considered to be conceptual in some ways, but that it stands alone. I was listening to pieces, and now I'm like, wow, this really does so fit together. Also, that's a bonus for the listener, that it's a standalone and the 8 pieces come together to make that picture.
Yeah.
That's a bonus.
Yeah, I'm just cognizant that they do have to stand alone, particularly these days.
Right.
But I think that's that's a responsibility of the maker. And the like I said, puzzles earlier, I love to layer the puzzles on. I also love to leave some of the work undone. I think, hitting someone over the head with it is no fun. Some songs, I think a song like Monsters of Mercy, which is towards the end of the album, almost is like, it's almost like a deck of cards. It's like flashing a card and then dropping the card and flashing a card and dropping the card. Even the guitar that Sean plays is so succinct and specific that it sort of goes, image, 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 and then guitar, and then space to digest. And by doing that, you're true to the pop song form, which can only bear so much weight.
Right.
And you're also forcing yourself remember the listener does most of the work.
Right. Yeah. No, that's it's genius. It's a genius way to put it all together into a package for the listener, to let them dissect it the way they want, but gently lead them to the water that this is kind of going on under the current,
Yeah.
but you can listen to it by itself. You can listen to this.
Yeah. I think that also really mirrors something that comes up in I like it's funny to me because I think this album's very vulnerable, but also I feel like I'm acting on it. And I've actually sort of like, I wouldn't say I struggled with that. I mean, I don't care.
Yeah. Right.
I sang how I sang, you know, and I did my best. So, you know, you walk away.
Right.
But I've been intrigued by that idea that I feel like it's very vulnerable and it's got a fiction layer on it. And I just think there is something when people are connecting throughout however many layers of the medium or time or language, whatever it is. I do think when someone gets in touch with something that actually happened, even if they don't explain it, that's the vulnerability and authenticity that matters.
Yeah.
And as long as it gets encoded just minimally, it jumps over to the other person. It has the potential to jump over to the other person.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think about, you know, I mean, I think about something like COVID, and when we just touch upon something that's difficult for us about it, it's not about the specifics. It's the shared shorthand of difficulty that bridges the space.
Yes.
And I think that's somehow that the succinctness required by reasonable pop songwriting is, on the one hand, a limitation, and on the other hand, a great strength.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I want to be respectful of your time today because I know you have other commitments and everything.
Yeah.
So I just want to do a quick walk down the album towards June 18th here. I know you released the first single. It was Lightfield back in July of last year. And then, you know, with the ever-changing world that we're in, when do we drop the album? Do we need some more time to wait so it's the right time for the world to get it? Because we can't do much to promote it right now. All those different things I'm sure came into place. And then we're getting closer now to being able to do things. So in March, you released All in My Head.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so now with the album approaching in a couple months, do you think that there's a third single that's going to hit right before the album then, I would think?
Yeah, we've got, let's see, we have Paper Angel lined up for, I think, next Friday, the 23rd.
Favorite song, by the way, I got to say.
Awesome.
I whenever I put this on to listen, you know, that first track, yeah, I just love it. It's got such a fresh sound to it. It has a, I don't, you know, what's radio anymore? We don't know, but it's got a radio friendly sound to it. It just has that singable, hummable. I find that song is the one song from the album that stays in my head as That's cool. Walk away from my computer, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that one's coming out next Friday. And then I think we end up in American Canyon land. The track.
Yeah.
The song will come out, I think, early May, and then the video will come out mid-May, late May, pointing us towards the release of the record in June. So yeah, we've got those ones in the pipeline. You know, Monsters of Mercy, I think, is going out on an exclusive premiere with somebody in late May too. So we'll put that out maybe more quietly on the single side, but more loudly on the premiere side. So yeah, we still have a good handful of things to go between now and middle June.
Yeah, that's great. So you're right on the track towards the release of the new album. What's the best way for people to that want to learn more about the band? So many social media outlets. Where do you guys find to spend most of your time?
We're mainly Facebook, and some Instagram.
Okay.
And then we're at thejennything.com. And that's a good way to read, hear, see videos, point you out to YouTube. We have a lyric video out for Lightfield, which is really cool. It's a little hand-drawn animated thing. I actually collaborated with a digital artist from HBO New York on that one. And I did a lot of the, I actually did a lot of the final art on that one. So there's a little flying car that is sort of the main character of that video. Yeah, so thejennything.com and Facebook, come check us out. And that's the best way to connect.
When we get past the point where we can start being back on a live stage again, do you have plans to be doing shows there and across, or staying in California? What do you think will happen?
We're just figuring that out. I mean, I think, you know, the beauty of this album is that it's completely unencumbered by a live performance.
Right.
Although I will also say, I think every song, literally, including Aromatica, has live drums on it. So, so I don't want to say like, you know, this whole thing's synthetic. There's actually a lot of real stuff made in real spaces, and all that. But that being said, you know, the four of us standing in a room and playing was actually used almost as a special effect. You know, like Paper Angel is a place where there are passages where it's us rocking out, and it's switching between that happening and that not happening, or that being exaggerated with electronics and things. But there's a long way of saying we're figuring out how to play live, and whether that means reinterpreting this stuff into a very pure electronic performance. That's one area of research we're on right now. The other one is to actually build it as sort of a booster rocket on top of the rock and roll approach.
Yeah.
Or do we go a third way, which might be like super deconstructed, almost like, I would say it's all, you know, almost like a piano concert, except everything's electronic, and it's kind of like smaller instruments, bigger voice. And right now we're just trying to put that together. I think where we are right now is we have a couple of promotional type things that are online, but we're trying to build up the capacity to do a short set in any size room. It's an excuse to develop this. So we'll say it's in the laboratory.
It's a good place for it to be right now. It's a good place for it to be, because lots of creativity can happen. Lots of creativity.
Yeah. And we have kind of like a month to figure it out.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, we'll get there. You know, overall, I just want it to be expressive and unique, and it can be different than the album. I'm very comfortable with that. So,
last question for you. If you could go on the road with any band, if your band could tour with anybody, you know, from the past, from the present, and you feel that the styles and the philosophy of how they write and how they present themselves, who would that band be?
Wow, that's great. So should they exist this moment, or?
They don't need to. They don't need to. It could be someone that hey, you might be getting these people off their couches to do some music with you. So, you know, like we said before earlier, you might be able to talk one of these people into it. So maybe
there you go. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really fun to time travel and put this stuff, you know, next to In Excess or Tears for Fears open for somebody like that.
Yeah.
And the time traveling would be almost to sort of say, man, what would it be like to stick, as you said, you know, stick Paper Angel on the radio, you know, next to In Excess or New Order, you know, in 1988 or something like that. Like that would be pretty neat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then, you know, past that, gosh, I mean, I almost would be interested in being a foil, you know, an opener that was really, really different. You know, I would almost say like, you know, Adele or Sade or something, you know, you know, just the idea again being outside of a scene, and more into like something just enormous and invitational. I mean, that's what I love about music like that is I actually feel like it's a channeling type of music. It's not necessarily about adoring even the song or the person. It's
Yeah.
almost like creating a shared space.
I,
That
I like
something about that
and
attracts
you know,
me.
if you think about it, labels and promoters have always gone out of their way to put two like bands together. But I mean, I like Sade, but I also like the Police,
Yeah,
and I also like the Beatles, and I also like uh, I'm gonna go out and hair metal bands for a moment, Dokken, or I'm really gonna
yeah,
mix it up, you know, and just say all over the place. I am from all the years in the music industry and record stores, I'm all over the place in my music, all over it, and classically trained, and I like country. So we assume that someone has to hear two of the same band like style music, but how cool would it be to show up at a Depeche Mode concert and hear an artist that was completely just different and say,
yeah,
well, I like that too. I like both flavors. It
yeah.
doesn't have to be both. I like your concept.
Yeah, actually, you know, along those lines, I mean, this is a big fat concert, but it really expressed what you're saying. It was the Zoo TV, I think the
Oh
Zoo
yeah.
TV tour.
Yep, I
I
saw that.
saw, yeah, I saw them with U2, of course, with the Sugar Cubes and Public Enemy opening. And actually, we were talking earlier about the power of twos and threes, right?
Yep.
And it was the space defined by those three groups
Yeah.
was beautiful, and it didn't give you for 1 second the feeling that, okay, this is the junior version of the Big Daddy, and then, you know, this is now the will be someday version of the Big Daddy, and then here's the Big Daddy. It was really a sense of like, let's open up a horizon for all of this music to occur on.
Yeah.
That's not, it's not about being in some sort of like closed set, you
Yep.
know. We're gonna have the same instrumentation, we're gonna have the same approach, we're gonna have the same look, we're gonna have the same feel. No, it just exploded that. So that was a great example of that kind of thinking, I think. It may take a gargantuan band, it may take an 800-pound gorilla band like U2 to get that job done and to actually open up
But what a great
space.
concept, though. What a great concept.
But they did it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then
They can do it
you
again.
say more power to them because
Right.
they chose to do it, you know.
Right. So,
Yeah.
well, I want to thank you so much for your time. You've given us so much of your time today. I'm excited about the
Thank
new
you.
album, and I just wish you all the best, you and the band, for all that you are about to embark on with the new album being released.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. And June 18th will be here soon, American Canyon. And want to thank you for, you know, putting this show together
My
and
pleasure. My
for
pleasure.
all your writerly and musicianly instincts that you clearly bring to the conversation.
Thank you.
Just
Thank
makes you really fun to talk to, and thanks for your interest. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I thank you so much for your kind words, and I wish you guys the best as this new album is about to hit the streets. So
Thank you, Kevin.
thanks so much.